America's ready to get back to work, but to win in the new economy,
wherever you are, make it Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Hello and welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, TalkStream Live, among others. We are here in the Heartland holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. Well, as you know, with the virus, lots of children have been suffering. They have been out of school. Depression, suicide rates have increased. And so today we have the perfect guest to talk about this subject. We have Dr. Julie Connor, and she believes that conversations can heal the world. She not only is a TED speaker, but also a school assembly speaker, author, and mental health advocate. She helps youth as well as adults throughout the country talk about tough topics like mental illness, substance abuse, bullying, and suicide prevention. Julie trains teens to be peer advocates. She's a source of strength trainer and equips teen leaders and caring adults to be mentors and role models. She provides resources for those struggling with mental illness, their families, and adults who care about them. Dr. Connors empowers youth and adults with communication skills to build strong relationships, create healthy boundaries, and resolve conflict. She is the author of the award-winning personal goal-setting book, Dreams to Action, Trailblazer's Guide. So welcome, Dr. Julie. Are you there? Oh, my. Well, just before we went on, we had a little technological blip. So we are going to see, Julie, are you there? Okay. Patrick, do we have a way to get Julie back on, or?
Yeah, I'll work on that. And
okay.
In the meantime, maybe you could talk about some of the upcoming events. I don't know if you have any new information on some of the influences that are going on today.
Yeah, so as I just said, one of the unintended or sometimes often not talked about results of the virus and closing of the schools has been, kids being at home, and suicide rates are sky high, and mental illness, substance abuse, all these things have increased because one of the problems with isolation, especially kids, is they can become depressed and fall into mental illness. Now, we are all social creatures at heart, and so by isolating us and keeping us apart from our loved ones, our friends, creates all these unintended consequences that we're going to be talking about today and what we can do about them.
All right, let's see if Dr. Julie's back on our call now. Dr. Julie, are you there?
I am here.
Awesome. All right.
I know.
So thank you for working through the technical issues we had here. You sound great now. And
great.
So, yeah, we just introduced you. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get started in all this?
Oh, gosh. We always get started in our thing. Spirit guides us, that's for sure.
Right.
In 2011, I finished my doctoral degree, and 2 weeks after I finished my doctoral degree in education, the school district where I worked downsized, and I was invited not to come back, along with many other people that were in similar positions to mine. And it was about that time that I started to receive invitations to do public speaking. But 4 years into that, I received a phone call from a mental health organization that asked me to do a youth leadership conference, and I thought that was odd. because I had done youth leadership training, and I didn't know why a mental health organization was asking me to come. And they had 26 high schools coming. And they said, well, we've got Students Against Drunk Driving component. And so I went, I accepted. And afterwards, she came up to me, and I could tell as she was walking towards me, it was one of those pivotal lives where life changes, that's walking towards you. And that's what happened to me. She walked toward me and she said, we're so grateful you came. We're going to be starting a recovery conference, and we'd like to invite you to keynote at that. I had always held my cards, my personal life, close to my chest. I did not speak openly about that. I encouraged good communication skills, and goal-setting strategies, and things that uplift people. I did not share I was afraid if I shared anything about my personal life, I would be labeled and I would be stigmatized. But I did accept. And I knew any anonymity that I had was going to be gone once I decided to accept that. But what I learned to realize was I was being invited into my life's purpose. When I was, for as young as third grade, I can remember starting to struggle with periods of darkness, and that accompanied with a full-blown panic disorder as I reached junior high. By the time I was a young adult, I was experiencing full-blown panic attacks, agoraphobia, and a severe depression. And this was at a time when Librium and so many sedatives were used to treat mental illness, and I was diagnosed with hypochondria. And I believe years, so often people that are struggle with mental illness receive messages such as, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and it's all in your head. Well, yeah, of course it's in your head. Where else, can you think of a worst possible place to be? I think I've heard Marianne Williamson say that before. And, but it was, what was interesting was by this point in my life, I was terrified of driving, terrified of leaving home, and I received a phone call from a university, and they wanted me to teach. So I was living in a rural area at the time. I got my car, drove 30 miles away. I was crying. I was scared. They sent me over to the safety department, and they said, we only want you to teach one class. We need somebody with an educational background to teach driver's education. And I said, I'm afraid to drive. And he said, Julie, we don't understand the words you're using, but if you trust us, we'll teach you how to take care of yourself behind the wheel of a car. And all of this was equipping me with skills to learn another way how to deal with the struggle of mental illness. And one of the most important things that happened, including meditation, including prayer, including exercise and diet, and how all of those pieces play a part in that, but also the importance of communication skills. I had no skills for expressing how I thought, how I felt, and when I started teaching those, and first in leadership, a leadership capacity, and then starting to teach teens, and then later their teachers and other adults, the question I kept being asked over and over was, why didn't anyone teach us these kinds of skills before? About how to express oneself, about how to deal with emotion, about how to ask for help. And so that's what personal experience became the doorway to finding my life's purpose. The one thing that I was most ashamed of is what directed me in a way that I could help others.
It seems ironic to me that in school we aren't often taught some of those very essential life skills like basic communication.
Absolutely. And we're taught how to write and how to put periods and use punctuation. But how does this play into how do we make this part of our life? And it's something I'm very committed to. This will be my work for the rest of my life.
Isn't
And
it awesome
because
when you get to that point?
It's all of a way of looking at challenges. We can look at challenges as those things that become obstacles and get in our way, prevent us from moving forward, as those things that label us as failures, and then we label ourselves as failure. Or we can look at it as challenges, as directional arrows that say, not that way, go this way. And when we can start looking at challenges as door openers, as open windows, then our whole perception about mistakes and past errors and ways we've tripped up along the way become channels of new opportunities.
And Julie, you have this amazing quote that you've used that says, change looks like an arrow but feels like an obstacle. And so I think today, more than ever, with the whole virus and upheaval in schools, kids are dealing with change in a way they never have before. So how can change be a source of good in our lives as opposed to, oh my gosh, total upheaval and terrible stuff?
I think we're conditioned to believe, oh my gosh, terrible stuff. I think one of the things, and some of this is just basic learning life skills. I heard Patrick say that it was, these are things that we don't learn in school. I think how to deal with difficulty are things we don't learn in school. How to deal with challenges are things that we don't learn in school. And so when we forgive ourselves for past mistakes and start looking at challenges and change as opportunity, that's a beginning. Could you repeat? I heard part of your question, but I did the second part.
Well, just overall, in a nutshell, how do we teach kids to use change productively rather than, sometimes kids just freak out with change, especially teens. They're going through so many changes, and I think that's when a lot of the problems come up. So how do we teach them to use change for positive?
Well, the first thing we do is we model how to deal with change in positive ways. This is my 40th year in education and working with young people and adults. And I think we need to be very careful about telling kids about just say no and all the slogans and you're the best, be the best, dream big without modeling it ourselves. And so we need to go to a place of calm before we step into calm situations or before we react when a change occurs. So it's the very first thing we do is model the kind of behavior we want kids to learn. And then we start having open and honest conversations with young people about how to deal with difficulty. Kids do feel pressure. And it's the thing I hear most about from teens, even before they say, I think that kids are dealing so much with peer pressure. Well, certainly they are. But the thing that kids always name first is the pressure that they get, that they feel from all sides, from teachers, from parents, from families, from college recruiters, from team and coach recruiters, and it seems to be starting earlier and earlier. There's middle school students that are worried about being able to make teams and being able to be successful. And I heard one teen say recently, I am expected to be the best at everything, the best student, the best athlete, the most successful volunteer, the most popular kid in my class. And when I fall short of that, I'm a failure. And there's so many kids that are walking around with a label on their forehead that they've self-imposed that says failure. And they see it and they wear it and they don't know how to take it off. As adults, when they see us dealing with life's events, they see us being able to roll with the punches. They themselves learn to. And I think something else that adults can do is open conversations about this. And it's really hard because most adults, one thing I tell young people a lot is they're starving. They're more than wanting to talk to to adults. They're starving for opportunities, but they don't have the language to ask for help. And we seem to be living in a time right now, even with a global pandemic, of being able at an individual level to ask for help. And the way kids learn it is to see adults do it first. And I tell kids too, when they say, I want to talk to my parents, I want to talk to another adult, but I'm afraid of what they'll think. And I always tell them, well, they're scared. However much fear you have of them, they're twice that afraid of you and afraid of what you want to think. Because kids, adults want approval. They want to fit in. And when kids hear that, they're relieved. And when we start having some of these open conversations, there's nothing that's more of a relief than to hear someone else say, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. You feel that way too?
Yeah. So one of the things too, first of all, I'm curious, when the children said, that they had to be the best, they felt pressure. Was that pressure? Did they feel like that was coming from their parents? Did they feel like that was coming from their peers? Was it coming from themselves? Where was that pressure coming from?
Yes,
so
yes.
All of the above.
Yes. And social media, that's a whole different story, is the pressure that kids feel from comments and things that they see in social media, from everything. There's third graders that are fourth graders, third graders, second graders that are dealing with eating disorders because they don't look like they don't look or appear like what they think they should look like. And so oftentimes when kids go to addiction, it's even with eating disorders, it's much less about wanting to look like someone else and everything to do with control. And addiction becomes addiction when there are no more options left. As the addiction rates continue to rise, so do it is second leading cause among the Center for Disease Control shared that the suicide is the second leading cause of death between young people ages 10 to 24. That's
amazing.
That's
and
global
sad because
tragedy.
it's something that they're, with some help, they would be able to control that. But it's sad that, they're getting to that point. I mean, it reminds me of Japan, they had this culture of perfectionism where
Right.
it was leading to this very high rate of suicide because people just couldn't handle the pressure anymore.
China, and they're still dealing with it, and so is China, so is Asia, and so are we, because we've got this pressure of perfectionism. And I'm sorry, Kathryn.
Oh, I wanted to also, Julie, touch on, you said at the heart of these eating disorders and things is control, the need for control. And so that's it's really deep. I think that is totally accurate. And, do you think it's because in their life they're feeling everything is out of control? And so that's, food, for example, is one thing they can control. So then how do we deal with that from a spiritual perspective? Like, how do we solve this control thing?
I love the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the power to change. I'm forgetting this. How is that possible? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think prayer is essential to living a healthy life. If you don't mind, if I backtrack for a moment,
Sure.
At one point when I was really struggling years ago with major depression and severe panic disorder, and they didn't even have really words at the time to describe it back in the late 80s. The only solution they had available to me, other than trying to encourage me to let me know that everything was okay, and I knew it wasn't, was through medication. And someone came up to me, and I think it was an orderly. I can't remember. I knew it was somebody that I didn't know. He knew me, but I didn't know him. I just remember he was wearing all white, and he had this old beat up cassette in his hand. And I'll let you know how long ago this happened. And he had this cassette in my hand, and he said, "Julie, I don't know if this will help, but maybe it might." And I never saw him again. And on the cassette was using guided meditation. It was guided meditation using the body to relax the mind on one side and using the mind to relax the body on the other side. And I played that old cassette tape over and over and over again until it was in shreds. But by the time it was completely obliterated, it had already become part of my own self-talk. And this gave me the words in a new way of prayer. I grew up in a very, very conservative Irish family that were masters of memorized prayer. And it is good, and it is a way many people connect to spirit, which is, I believe, any form that connects people to a higher power or presence of God is beautiful and grace, and all about grace. And but I also needed other tools, and prayer through meditation quieted my mind long enough that I could be open, my heart can be open to the presence of spirit, enough to where the prayer became me being still enough to listen as opposed to talking. I think this relates directly to issues of control and releasing control. Is, prayer through talking, as wonderful as it is something I can control. I can control the words that come out of my mouth. I can control how I express them. I can control how loudly or quietly I express them. But meditation and quiet reflection is often just the opposite. We have to quiet ourselves and then be open to allow to be touched, our hearts and minds and spirits to be touched by something greater than ourselves. And that can be scary, especially for those that are used to having noise around them. We're living in times that are constantly surrounded by noise. And prayer invites us into the quiet.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So how have some of those spiritual experiences that you've had impacted your journey?
Oh, it completely changed it. I think as I was growing up and there was chaos growing up, my father was an active alcoholic. My mom was doing everything that she could do to bring food into our homes. And there was a period of several years where the only thing they could afford was a nanny that came into our house. And for several years, I was a survivor of physical abuse. And when my parents got home from work, they I knew she was talking to them and telling them something. I knew it was about me, because I would be punished and sent back to the darkness of the bedroom that I had spent the entire day in. And when I came out, I was never asked about what happened, but I was punished for whatever it was that was happened. And the punishment was I wasn't allowed to talk. So I was robbed of the very tools that I needed to ask for help.
Oh, wow.
And where this led to me was a downward spiral journey into figuring out what it is I was doing wrong and how I could correct it. And since no one would tell me what was bad, what I was doing bad, then the only answer I could come up with myself, even as young as 5 years old, was that I'm inherently bad. I'm bad. And to live with those negative feelings is traumatic and heartbreaking, and I needed something else that loved me unconditionally and entered God. Thank God for the voice of God that reminded and allowed me to believe to the beautiful mentors and role models in my life that were that reminded me that I was good, that God is love, and he who abides in God abides in love, and God in him, and that God is in me, and that God is in all of us, and then we are expressions, creative, wonderful, beautiful expressions of God's love. And
all right, we're going to need to pause there for just a moment. Julie, we're going to pick up with that where we left off after the break. And
sure.
So you are listening to Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio, among others, and we will catch you on the other side.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back from the break. If you're just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries. We're coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio, among 8 others. So if you're interested in some other options, you can always go check out our Facebook page at Spirit's Journey Radio on Facebook, and you can get all your list of options. We're here today with Dr. Julie Connor. We're talking about conversations that can heal the world.
And of course, Julie has shared her amazing story with us, how she battled with mental illness and depression growing up, and through meditation, spirituality, learning how to communicate has totally shifted her life. And so, Julie, I wanted to start the second half of the show reading something very interesting on your website, which is the acronym STIGMA, about curing and stomping out mental illness. And the S is for silence the shame. The T is for trustworthy people. I is ignore negative thoughts. G is get positive support. M, make small changes. And A, always celebrate success. So these are amazing concepts. So how do we get this into schools, and how do you teach this to kids? What kind of program, and how do you do this besides modeling?
As a TED speaker, as a school assembly speaker, I am privileged to travel to middle school and high school throughout the country to talk to students. And shortly after I started talking about mental illness, one of the things that I find so lovely and wonderful and encouraging is, for many years when I was invited to come in, usually it was during a mental health awareness week. And for many years, I would ask schools and tell schools, when they wanted to hire me, they'd come in, and during our mental health week, I would often ask the staff, would you like me to do training with the staff? Would you like me to do workshops? I'll be happy to throw those in free of charge. Would you, if they lived close to where I live in the Midwest, I was willing to come and do follow-up with either the kids or empower adults with skills. And more often than not, the response was, nope, we're good. Just, once it's enough. And it's not. But I was grateful for the opportunity, always grateful for the opportunities whenever we can have conversations about mental illness. But I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is the ongoing programs that schools are going through to carry on conversations, open conversations with young people to make it about where the resources are. Programs developing schools such as character development and communication and conflict resolution. One of the programs that I think is most exciting is one that I'm proud to be a trainer for, and it's called Sources of Strength. And it's a program where we go into school and train young people to be peer leaders, and we pick leaders across all socioeconomic backgrounds, across all cultural grounds. Who are the leaders in the school, and how can we empower young people with tools to reach out and be support to one another, to have conversations rather than, so often in conversations about mental health, we focus on the trauma. Well, what if we take that model and turn it a bit, like facets of a diamond, and take a look at how can we have conversations with kids about what do you do when you're struggling with life challenges? What sources of strength, what tools do you already have? Who are trusted adults in your life? If you don't have, if there's not a healthy relationship with a family member, who is, maybe a family member may feel like your best friend's mom, or it may be a coach, or what are the healthy activities you're involved with? Spirituality is a part of that. How do you connect to spirit in a way that feels healthy and good and whole and satisfying? Mental health access and tools to those kinds of resources within the school and within the community. There's a growing number of community access, and the thing that I find so exciting is the efforts that schools, churches, and community organizations are making to network one another so that kids are being surrounded with a community of support from different resources. So it's not just one person or one place or one thing, but rather, just like they say, that it takes a village to raise a child. I love it that so many community organizations are networking together to support kids. And I think training kids in peer leadership skills and how to reach out to one another is so important, because with kids, especially those at risk of suicide, kids are 1 in 4 are so much higher. The percentage is so much higher for young people to make a contact, another caring adult, if a teen has been part of that conversation and said, hey, do you want to go? We have caring adults on our staff. There's a counselor. There's a coach. There's somebody that has been identified within the group, within the facility, within the school, within the church as a caring adult. I'll go with you so you don't have to go alone. And so I think this is really critical in terms of, how can we reduce stigma? We can have open conversations and involve kids, not only in being the ones we talk to, but involve them in the conversation so that they can also minister to one another. We're not training them to be junior counselors. We're empowering them with tools to connect young people in crisis with those with the caring adults that do have the tools that can help and support.
So with the adults and parents, how can they build trust with these teens so that they can open up these lines of communication like you're talking about?
I think it begins in the one-on-one, and it's risky and scary and challenging for adults, but every efforts that we make to open a conversation, just beginning with, hey, hello, tell me about your day, celebrating successes. Even say, and sometimes a success doesn't look like an A. I think when I look back to when I was in college, one of the grades I was most proud of was a C I got in physics. I was so proud of that because I thought I failed the class. And that was a real reason of celebration to and so when we know young people are working really hard and trying their best, they need to be, those efforts and supported. I will always remember a quote from Robert Louis Stevens. He once said, children need to be loved, especially when they least deserve it. And I think when kids know that we are available and, we got to have a conversation with them first in terms of the things that we find interesting about them before they'll open up and reveal things that are difficult. So I think in those one-on-one conversations that happen over time, it's a commitment that we as adults must make.
And Julie, I was curious what your thoughts are on this. So, and as a matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody the other day who was telling me, oh my gosh, I have anxiety and all this. And how much of a role do you think food, chemicals in the environment, the heavy metals in the vaccines, glyphosate, the pesticides, is that playing a role in messing up not only kids but adults, our whole system? I mean, glyphosate's been shown, to affect the hormones and in our bodies. The rise in junk food and all this processed foods. How much do you think that is playing a factor in the increasing, role of mental illness and, depression and suicide among people today versus 100 years ago?
Extremely. I'm so glad you brought that up because mental illness is not about, it's not 100% treatment of mental illness, I should say, and good mental health, mental wellness even by itself is dependent not on one thing, not on counseling, not on journaling, not totally on prayer. Prayer is important, but it's a piece of the whole picture. Diet is critically important in terms of good mental health. For example, even water. That's, we do not drink enough water. And when it's important for people to know, for example, that dehydration, when we're not getting enough water, mimics all the symptoms of anxiety. And so if we're properly hydrated, that's very important for our physical and mental health. There are foods, sugar, and these are such triggers and so whatever we can do to get to whole foods, it's so much better for our mental and physical health. I remember about 10 years ago, a friend of mine is a health coach. And, I was a speaker. I was on the road. I always ate all four groups. I was, all four food groups. I was really proud of myself. I ate out of vending machines, and microwave popcorn is a vegetable. Diet Coke is low in calories. Peanut butter crackers out of the machine is carbohydrates and protein. And I thought I had it. I was a former science teacher. I got this down. And I promised I was a health coach that I would go listen to a chiropractor and writer named Dr. Michelle Robin. And she believes in small changes, big shifts. At the time, I was part of a study. And it was for people that dealt with irritable bowel syndrome. And I was going to get $2,000 as a result of being a participant in the study. All I had to do was agree to take a medication for it. And so over the course of 4 weeks, I had to keep a food diary before I was going to be fully admitted and be allowed to take the medication as part of the study. Well, at the beginning of this, while I was keeping my food diary, I went to hear this Dr. Robbins speak about making small changes and big shift in diet. So I thought, this is stupid, but I told a friend of mine that I'd do it. And so I started to drink 2 full glasses in the morning of water with 2 drops of lemon essential oil before I started my day. And I started the day with a green smoothie. And I thought that, whatever, I'll try it because they said to try it. By the time, 4 weeks later, by the time the study started and they were going to dispense the medication, I had to drop out of the study because my body regulated itself and I no longer needed the medicine. And I'm all in now on the role. And because I was such a vending machine junkie, it was gradual change over time. It was eating more vegetables, green leafy vegetables that have vitamin A. And for me, everybody is different. I'm not going to espouse what anybody should do, but for me, going gluten-free really helped my tummy. It relieve a lot of anxiety that I was experiencing. It may not be the case for everyone, but it was for me. I lived on a farm for about a quarter of my life, and I was married. My husband, we had at the time had lived in a farming community, and we used pesticides and chemicals to protect the crops. But our thinking was that if you had vegetables that were affected by pesticides, that you just washed it off. And I remember when they went to the Farm Bureau once and they were told about wearing hazmat suits, the guys all laughed at it. They said, "We don't have time for that." And he often came home drenched in it. Even after he died of abdominal cancer, it was 2 years after the fact. Me, like most Americans, weren't making the food to mouth connection yet. And what the pivotal piece for me was when I was looking online and I read an online article about pesticides, but it wasn't even the article that impacted me. It was a picture of a sharecropper dressed in a hazmat suit, spraying strawberries with chemical. And strawberries, as I'm sure your listeners know, are above ground fruits with very thin skins. You don't put a chemical on that and wash it off. It seeps into the skin. There's a reason so many of our kids are so much bigger now. I thought it was because of our healthy diet. Our kids are eating meats that are pumped with, that come from the same hormones that are being fed to chickens and to cattle that are pumping them up and making them stronger or making them bigger. There's a big difference between stronger and bigger. And just because they're bigger doesn't make them happy. So there is absolutely a full connection. When I saw that photograph, I went organic that day. And
that would be quite alarming, wouldn't it, to see somebody handling your food in a hazmat suit?
Oh my gosh. I don't know why I didn't make the connection earlier, but we learn when we learn. We learn when we're ready. We don't make changes in our life when we need to. We make them when we're ready.
Well, that's one of the things that I pointed out, too, because with my background in biology, I look at the body as a biological system. And I know there's some scientists and some people who look at the body as just this mechanical, biological machine that if something is going wrong, then you just take a medication or something to balance out the chemicals. And what I would like to point out is like what you're talking about. The foods that we eat on a daily basis are changing the chemistry of our body. And if your nutrition is off,
brain.
Yeah, but it even goes beyond that because even when we meditate, for example, we're releasing positive endorphins. And when we exercise, we're releasing chemicals that are changing the balance in our body and our mind. And so all of that affects the mind. And, that was something we were talking about, I think, on an earlier show that sometimes in metaphysics, people have this idea that, it's all mental. But it really is a balance between the two. It's the body affects the mind and the mind affects the body. And so when you make a change in either one of those areas, you're going to have a positive impact on both.
Yes, absolutely. When I was looking at that picture of the strawberries and the sharecropper, the very first thing that came into mind, as teachers, oftentimes the subject matter are categorized in boxes: reading, math, English, spelling, science, And sometimes that impacts our thinking as well. And how one affects the other wasn't even occurring to me until I saw that photograph. And as soon as I saw that photograph, the first thing that popped into my mind was Newton's laws of thermodynamics. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. You don't wash it off. It does affect the plant. And if it affects the plant, it affects us. It's got to be, it's not just a pill we take or one thing we do, just like you said. It is. I agree with you, Patrick, 100%. That it's a total wellness approach to life. And when
I have a dream. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Catherine, you had
I was going to say I have a dream, in schools where it's like kids start the year off with a full evaluation nutritionally, where they're at, chiropractic. I think that could, they're talking about how do we improve test scores? How do we improve test scores? Well, they're looking in the wrong places. They try to cram more information down them. It's like, no, if you get them balanced nutritionally and mentally and emotionally, they're going to ace those tests with much less studying and in a much more pleasant way.
I could talk for ages about this. If we've got time for me to make two more points, if there were things I could change in schools in tune to affecting kids' health, and there's several things that I could say, but two big ones is I would replace the vegetables, and I know the cells of things that come from vending machines support many of the extracurricular activities that are in programs, but we've got to find other ways to support those programs other than to the detriment of our kids in school. So if we could repeat, get kids, it's one thing to say in health class, eat healthy, and then have all this processed food and sugar-laden drinks at their access as soon as they walk out of class. And the other thing that I would change is, and this is a funny story. It's a tragic story, actually. When I was working on my dissertation, I was in a group where I was an instructional coach teacher at the time, surrounded by principals and superintendents in my cohort. And what I originally wanted to do my dissertation was the impact of recess on academic achievement. Every single one of those principals and superintendents said, we agree with it, we think it's important study, but with all the emphasis on scoring and testing and results right now, you will never get a principal or a school district to approve it. And I couldn't. That doesn't mean there's not one that won't, but I couldn't, so I had to change my topic. Now, I do believe that was back in 2011, and I think we're at a time now where people are looking more at, as we look at dealing with mental health, we've also got to look at the kids' physical health, and how are we supporting that? How are we modeling that? And what are we providing in our schools that support it? We can't just say it in word, we must support it with action.
Yeah, I agree totally.
I think kids should have like a 15-minute brain recess every hour or every hour and a half. I think you're so right on. Just to get out in the sunshine, a little vitamin D, they just don't make the connection between, in their minds, in the superintendent's mind, they're losing class time. It's like, no, you don't get it. They're actually gaining class time by being out in that sun for 10, 15 minutes.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking of vitamin D, that's one of the connections that they're finding even with the coronavirus, is that some of the people who are, or quite a few of the people actually who are having a lot of trouble with it, have a deficiency of vitamin D. So just getting out in the sun and things like that, people don't realize just the impact of getting out into nature and having fresh air.
So important, especially with those dealing with depression, to have some contact with the sun. And even if your body isn't physically able to do a lot of strenuous exercise in the sun, even just to take a book and to spend at least a bare minimum of 15 minutes a day in the sunlight will make you feel so much better. And it's just critically important. Something else that I'm so excited about to see studies in is years ago when I first started doing meditation, and learning how to use my body, learning how to relax my body, to use meditation to relax my mind and body. I was teaching 3rd and 4th graders and children through grade 8 at the time. And so when I started learning these techniques, I started incorporating them into instruction, just trying different things to see how the kids might respond. Because it also gave me a time during the day, if I was dealing with panic, it gave me an opportunity to stop and breathe as well. The kids loved it. They loved guided meditation. They begged for it. And now they're doing studies with meditation, something that those that embrace Eastern practices have known for a long time, is that when they use meditation practices and teach these practices to kids, the conflict and disciplinary problems greatly reduce in schools, because basically one of the wonderful benefits of teaching meditation to kids is they learn self-control.
Yeah, that is so important.
Julie, we're getting close to the end, and I want to make sure people know how they can contact you and book you as a speaker.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I am available. My website is www.drjulie.com. My last name is Conner, C-O-N-O-R. If you look for Julie Conner, C-O-N-N-E-R, you will not find me. So I had students that called me Miss Conner with an O for many years. But yeah, I have a website. You can find me there. I'm all over social media. So at drjulieconner.com, at drjulieconnor.com. And I an award-winning personal goal-setting book for those that are looking for how do you get focused and have all these thoughts and dreams inside and then make that a practical goal. Well, I've got a book for that called Dreams to Action, Trailblazer's Guide, and that's available on Amazon.
Excellent. Well, you're going to be in high demand, Julie, because with everything going on with the virus and schools not sure if they're opening or closing or what they're doing, I think your services are greatly needed right now. So check out
I think something that schools are doing that's wonderful is they're doing so many things virtually with kids, and that's very exciting. So yeah, we can keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for making time with us today. And if you could just hang out with us a little bit after the show, we'd love to be able to chat with you just a little bit. And do you have any final thoughts on, how parents could help their kids? We got about 30 seconds here.
There's a little saying, my favorite quote, the same fire that melts butter hardens steel. And it's important that we can teach our kids resiliency through models. Parents are always the primary teachers.
Awesome. Well, we love having you all with us. And so you can connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. You can also check out all of the different options. We're on 10 different stations live now, so you can check out all of your options. And this has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
I'm Kathryn. Have a great week, folks. We'll catch you next Saturday.
See you on the other side.